Well, I think you see the opportunity to express and have compassion for people all the time. I mean, directly in the university, you see it in the whole run of things that occur in a community of 15,000 people, right? Tragedies that occur, difficulties people encounter, even just hearing stories of things that students have had to overcome in their lifetimes always raises for me a feeling of not only compassion for them, but really admiration often when they've been able to overcome difficult situations. Yes, teaching things like empathy and compassion to students, I think, begins with getting people to understand the kinds of struggles that fellow members of the Stanford community may be going through. That can begin with family struggles within a member of the community's family. It can begin with struggles that our students are having here on campus. And it can also begin with greater awareness of national tragedies or international tragedies that occur, and asking what's our role, not only in an emotional connection to people who are going through that, but what can we do to help alleviate the suffering? And I think that's a question we ought to be asking ourselves, both about our local community and about the greater world in which we live. I think cultivating compassion, in my mind, begins with knowledge and understanding that people know that in fact there's tragedy or difficulties all around them, and that there and an awareness that they have of those kinds of things happening. Sometimes students will talk about the Stanford bubble, and well, it's up to each of us to prick that bubble and let the outside world in and be more aware of it. So I think it begins with your local community. You know, if you're a student living in a dorm, it begins with your dorm mates. If you're a staff member working somewhere, it begins with the people you work with, whether it's students or faculty or other staff members. And that awareness of things. I'm in a unique position in that I become aware of lots of challenges that people have. We're a big community, 15,000 students, another 10,000 staff. And of course we have a hospital here with local community people and often undergoing difficult situations in their own family. Once you're aware of that, you're much more aware of the challenges people face. And I think that's the beginning of trying to then build compassion and get people to reach out and see what they can do to try to alleviate it. Sometimes it's nothing more than a friendly voice or smile sometimes for somebody who's having a hard time. Sometimes it's, can I help some way? And all those things make a difference, I think. I think collectively we begin to think about the bigger challenges, whether it's, for example, the challenge that some of our own community members face as being undocumented immigrants here, and the challenge they face and what their future life may be like. Or it's a better understanding of what's going on outside the world. And I think then we can bring our expertise to solve it. And I think a key here is to think about compassion and empathy are the beginning. They're not the end goal. They're the beginning of a step for action and to think about what you might do. And a university has powerful tools. Certainly it can do it through charity and other things like that, but it can also do it by thinking about, you know, how do we work on problems that help solve and improve the quality of life for people who are halfway around the world, who we've never met, who have a much more difficult life than a typical person in the United States would have. Once you have that awareness, then you can ask, what can we as a community, given our ability, our resources, our talents, do to alleviate some of that suffering? I think probably for me a moment that sticks out, which is really about a moment about the Stanford community, was after 9/11, when we gathered for a memorial service. And It was a difficult time. You know, I'm a native New Yorker, born a mile or two from ground zero. So it was a very difficult time, and we had some alumni who lost their lives in that tragedy. And the community, the Stanford community at the time, felt a certain catharsis, but a certain paralysis. And it's a time when you've got to stand up, you've got to elicit that compassion and that empathy for the people who are suffering, and get everybody to think about what can they do to help make a difference. While remembering that at the same time, this is just one of many global tragedies occurring, but one that had sort of a connection to many people in the Stanford community. So for me, that was a very momentous moment, and a moment when a university president is called to stand up and speak wisdom to about these things. And I think it begins with compassion. And in fact, I quoted Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural, which is about compassion for the veterans and families that have borne the burden of the Civil War. You know, I think living a compassionate life means not insulating yourself, begins with not insulating yourself from the difficulties of the world and your ability to contribute to making the world better through empathy and compassion. I think that's the beginning of it. Then the question is, how can you make a difference? And each of us can make a difference. We can make a difference. If we've got compassion for people who are suffering, then we can make a difference in their lives. And we're in different places, and the kind of difference we can make may vary a lot. The question is, are you prepared to make a difference? So a book that's always struck me as a book about compassion and reacting to it is Tale of Two Cities. It's a book I read many years ago, but I've read several times over again. And it's a wonderful story. Obviously, it's a story about love and compassion, Dr. Manet for his daughter, and of course, in the end, the person who looks like the most superficial person in the entire book, who seems almost gluttonous in satisfying his own desires. He drinks a lot, eats a lot, Sidney Cartier. And in the end, does the most incredible thing, sacrificing his life for two other individuals that he admires and loves.